Good morning. I'm Pauline Verzosa. It is Thursday, the 21st of May, and we're bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matter. And now first on the agenda, the clock is now ticking for Vice President Sara Duterte. She has 10 days to answer the articles of impeachment served to her camp on Wednesday. And after that, the House prosecution gets 5 days to reply with a trial eyed by mid-June. Here's the report.
The Office of the Senate Sergeant at Arms has served the summons and a copy of the articles of impeachment to the Office of the Vice President. The OVP confirmed that it received the documents before 11 a.m. on Wednesday, based on the copy of the summons shared with us by House Prosecutor and Bicol Saro Party List Representative Terry Ridon. It contains the articles of impeachment, the annexes of evidence, as well as a USB drive containing soft copies of the documents. Basically, the writ of summons requires VP Sara to answer the allegations laid out in the articles of impeachment, from issues of unexplained wealth, misuse of confidential funds, bribery, and threats against the President. The impeachment court has given the Vice President 10 days to answer the articles of impeachment against her. Under the rules of the impeachment court, if the Vice President fails to answer, the trial will proceed. Once her camp submits its answer, the House prosecution will have 5 days to file its reply. Lidon says they expect the Vice President may again question the jurisdiction and constitutionality in her answer.
Our expectation is it will be more substantial than what had been submitted before. No, kasi in the previous answer po to the House Committee on Justice, it was basically just a very short response to all of the allegations. So hindi ho talaga point per point. No? But our expectation now is they will still be raising jurisdictional and constitutional questions, which they actually did the last time. But also they will have to, they will probably answer point per point. No? Yung pong articles of impeachment already, only because this is the last opportunity for the Vice President to actually answer all of the allegations.
According to House Prosecutor Ridon, they will present the articles of impeachment per article. They are confident that the evidence is enough to convict VP Sara.
On each and every ground naman po, we have high certainty that we can get a conviction, at the very least 16 votes. No? Lahat po ng grounds na pinasa po sa Senate Impeachment Court, mabigat po yun at enough to convict the Vice President.
The prosecution panel is hoping that the actual trial of VP Sara will begin by the 2nd or 3rd week of June. However, a Senate source said that the impeachment trial is expected to begin in July. According to a News 5 source, the proceedings were initially scheduled from Monday to Wednesday starting at 2 p.m. Following the State of the Nation Address or SONA, the schedule is expected to shift, with Mondays reserved from regular Senate sessions, while the impeachment trial will run from Tuesday to Thursday starting at 3 p.m.
Bukidnon 2nd District Representative Jonathan Keith Flores, one of the House prosecutors, said his abstention during the impeachment vote against Vice President Sara Duterte was out of respect for the sentiments of his constituents. In an interview with One News's Political Beat, Flores stressed that the impeachment proceedings should remain focused on evidence and legal arguments rather than political attacks. He added that the evidence presented during House hearings influenced his decision to join the prosecution panel. Meanwhile, Flores said he remains cautiously optimistic that the impeachment trial will push through, but stressed that anything can happen depending on Senate procedures and possible motions that may arise.
Ang abstention naman was in deference to the sentiments of the people. They were against it, no? So, as respeto na lang sa sentiments ng mga tao doon sa area, I parang opted to abstain. I could not vote no also because I was part of the Committee on Justice and I saw yung anong evidence that was presented. No? The evidence was presented against the Vice President and no evidence was presented in favor of the Vice President because she never showed up. So parang imposible naman that I will be voting against the articles of impeachment kasi nga nakita ko lahat ng evidence against her. So para ma-balance lang, no? I mean, respecting the preference of the people and at the same time what I know of what was presented also during the Committee on Justice, I abstained. It's ill-gotten wealth. and yung confidential funds. I think I was assigned to those two articles because I was also part of the Quadcom before, actively participated also in the hearings of good government. So familiarity with these causes of action is already there.
And in other news, Senator Risa Ontiveros clarified that her remarks regarding the shooting incident inside the Senate were focused on the institution's response and not intended to invalidate the emotions of fellow lawmakers. Here's the report.
Parang walang nangyari. Yan po ang statement ng ating butihing Senadora Risa Hontiveros. Siguro po para sa inyong mga wala dito. Pero para sa amin na nandito, napakaraming nangyari. Takot na takot po ako na kailangan ko na magpaalam sa mga anak ko. At yung staff ko, 2 pintuan ang pagitan ko sa putukan. Yung staff ko na si Claire, na 20 years na sa akin, nandun siya sa labas. She has a 12-year-old son. Kinuwento niya sa akin late na tumatakbo siya, hindi niya alam kung saan siya pupunta. Kaya para sabihin niyo na walang nangyari. Napakasakit para sa aming lahat na nandito.
Senator Pia Cayetano broke down in tears during yesterday's Senate session as she recalled the terrifying events inside the Senate building last Wednesday. At the time of the incident, only members of the majority bloc were inside the Senate attending a caucus, while minority bloc senators had already gone home early since they were not part of the meeting. During her emotional speech, Senator Pia criticized the minority bloc, saying not even one senator checked on those trapped in the middle of the commotion inside the Senate.
Pagtingin ko ng group natin, yung dating majority group, walang ni isa sa inyong nangamusta sa amin. Some of you I've known for 20 years, 10 years, and I didn't even hear any of you say, kamusta na kayo dyan? Napakasakit mo sa akin. Sobrang sakit.
Before Senator Pia addressed the chamber, Senator Risa Ontiveros expressed disappointment over how the Senate appeared to be responding to the incident.
Sa loob-loob ko, hindi ako mapanatag na simula nung Lunes, ang ipinapakita natin ay para bang walang nangyari. Na para bang hindi nabastos ang ating institusyon, ang ating mga empleyado, at ang mga Pilipino. Ganito na ba talaga kababa ang inabot ng ating politika sa Pilipinas? Ito na ba tayo, Mr. President? Tuluyan na bang nilihis ng politika ang ating mga pamantayan sa pakikipagkapwa?
She stressed that the shooting and incident caused serious damage to the dignity and credibility of the Senate, an institution long respected by the Filipino people.
The situation stooped so low that here, in and around these same august halls, may pwedeng magkasa ng barel sa harap ng mga sibilyan. Dear colleagues, kahit kailan, hindi yan nangyari sa Pilipinas. Kahit panahon ng kudeta, not even during the darkest days of martial law, did gunfire erupt within our halls. So, whether we stand in the minority or in the majority, the Senate, as an institution, has sustained a profound injury to its dignity, credibility, and moral authority before the Filipino people.
Hontiveros also emphasized that what happened inside the Senate was a grave act of disrespect and abuse, adding that lawmakers could not simply act as if nothing had happened. Senator Rodante Marcoleta was supposed to interpolate Hontiveros' speech, but Senate President Alan Peter Cayetano requested that discussions regarding the incident be deferred until Monday. Despite the move to postpone the discussion, tensions remained high as Senator Pia Cayetano continued to speak emotionally about the traumatic experience inside the Senate building.
Yes, I am very ready to share my story, to ask questions. Pero kung wala ho kayo dito, huwag niyong questionin yung mga nangyari sa mga nandito. Dahil nandito kami, kasama ng staff namin, Senate staff. You have your own story, I respect that. But please respect my own story.
Senator Hontiveros later clarified that her statement that it seemed like nothing happened referred to the Senate's overall response to the incident.
However, when I stated that it feels now as though walang nangyari, I was not speaking about our personal feelings. I was speaking about our institutional posture.
Thank you for
Our
that.
grief as senators is valid, but our mandate requires action.
Meanwhile, Senator Raffy Tulfo insisted that those responsible for the shooting and chaos inside the Senate building must be held accountable.
Although may mga putukan na narinig natin, ang nauna at inamin naman nung Sergeant at Arms and then kumating taga-NBI, that's why I already made my pronouncement. Tama lang yung pagsuspindi dun sa yung Sergeant at Arms dito. And then, dapat pati yung taga-NBI na gumanti para dapat silang parusahan.
Several senators have likewise agreed that an independent body should conduct a separate investigation into last week's incident inside the Senate to ensure an impartial probe. In an interview with 1PH's Sa Totoo Lang, Senator Risa Hontiveros said she and Senator Pia Cayetano remain on good terms after their emotional Senate exchange.
After we adjourned, nagkaroon kami ng focus para simulang paghandaan yung preparatory actions para sa impeachment trial. And nagkataong magkakatabi-tabi kaming lahat ulit. And okay naman. We were able to undertake that briefing together properly.
Don't go away. We will be back with more stories right after this break. Keep it here on One News. Pauline Verzosa. And here on Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues and we give you the context behind the headlines. The Supreme Court has denied the request of Senator Bato de la Rosa for relief from his ICC warrant of arrest. Mobile journalist Arles de los Santos has this report.
The Supreme Court on Wednesday denied Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa's plea for a temporary restraining order on the warrant for his arrest issued by the International Criminal Court. De la Rosa, who was the national police chief during the Duterte administration's bloody war on drugs, sought for a TRO to prevent the government from surrendering him to The Hague. That's through any warrant from the ICC or red notice from the International Criminal Police Organization or the Interpol. De la Rosa's lawyers has since insisted that any arrest warrant must come from a local court. The senator's camp, however, failed to convince magistrates. The High Tribunal's vote showed 9 in favor, 5 against, and 1 abstention to Bato's petition for relief. The SC said the full resolution and the opinions on this recent ruling will be uploaded on the court's website on Monday, May 25. The High Court, however, clarified that it only decided on the prayers for a TRO. The other pleadings and motions on De La Rosa's case are yet to be resolved. That includes a petition filed by De La Rosa and Digong Duterte in March 2025 questioning the legal basis of the Marcos administration's cooperation with the ICC to surrender the former president to the International Court. The main argument: the Philippines had not been a member of the Rome Statute since 2019 of March, and therefore, the ICC has no jurisdiction to probe and try any case over the Duterte drug war. For the decision to deny Senator De La Rosa's TRO, the question that naturally follows is, can Bato be arrested now? Will the government take this TRO denial as a cue to capture the former PNP chief, or will it wait for all issues to be resolved before making a move? As of today, De La Rosa remains hiding. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the Department of Justice is the designated agency to respond to such queries.
Sa ngayon, masasabi po natin na ang warrant of arrest ay valid laban dito kay Senator Bato de la Rosa. At ang lahat ng maaaring interpretasyon at evaluation na sabing resolution ng Supreme Court ay ibabato po natin kay Secretary Frederick Bida.
The National Bureau of Investigation for its part says though they are ready to arrest De La Rosa, there's still no official order for it. Lawyers of Senator Bato said they will file a motion for reconsideration on the SC's denial. In its statement, attorney Israelito Torion's law firm said that while it respects the High Court's decision, the tribunal's ruling only covered the request for interim relief and did not resolve the main constitutional issue raised in the case. The firm also maintained that the main case remains alive and vowed to pursue and exhaust all available legal remedies available to them. Kapatid Arles de los Santos, we are One News.
The Department of the Interior and Local Government confirmed that Senator Bato de la Rosa was seen leaving the Senate parking lot on May 14 alongside Senator Robin Padilla. More details in this report.
This CCTV footage timestamped 2:31 a.m. of May 13 shows Senator Robin Padilla at the parking area of the Senate. He even saluted to some men on his way out. Following the lawmaker is what looks like a woman, and then Senator Bato de la Rosa wearing a hat, or so authorities believe. All three boarded Padilla's white SUV and drove off. This was among the footage recently publicized by the Interior Department. On Wednesday, May 20, exactly a week after the shooting incident at the upper chamber, there's Senator Padilla on the sidelines of plenary session. But there's no more De La Rosa, who since May 14 has not been heard from again. Padilla says he does not know where his friend and fellow Duterte ally is. But when asked if he left with Bato on the wee hours of the morning Thursday last week, Robin Hood had this to say.
Ano ba kailangan sabihin ko doon? Nakita nyo na.
Nung lumabas po siya sa Senado.
Hindi naman AI yun, di ba?
Sir, saan kayo pumunta after?
Maraming salamat sa inyo. Nakuha nyo na yung gusto ninyo. Napanood nyo na. Palagay ko naman siguro makatahimik na kayo. Lahat yun ang tinatanong nyo. Naganap na yung investigasyon.
For now, the PNP's Criminal Investigation and Detection Group or CIDG declined to comment, but it did send subpoenas to Senate Sergeant-at-Arms Mau Aplasca and 10 of his personnel, and even recommended the filing of appropriate charges against them before the Justice Department. In particular, according to the CIDG, Aplasca and his team violated the rules of engagement under the Private Security Services Industry Act during the Senate's shooting incident on the evening of May 13.
Very clear naman po sa investigation natin na there was no attack sa Senate. Wala pong intent. In fact, if there is really a perceived na attack na ongoing, we can ask the same OSAA, bakit nila inabandon yung lugar after na magkaroon ng shooting? The most responsible thing to do is to talk first before draw your firearm. If it's a problem, let us talk first. If there is a question, let us I have to ask you first. You have to explain your side first.
The PNP group also insisted that the NBI did not violate any rule when they stationed themselves in the GSIS compound, adjacent to part of the Senate complex.
The Senate, including the Senate security, has full access to sa CCTV. So they will know kung meron na po bang mga are they preparing for an assault? Do they have breaching equipment? May mga ladder po ba? May mga explosive or anything?
After all is said and done, the CIDG is giving Aplasca to explain his decisions on the fateful night of May 13.
We are preparing the complete videos. Kasi what they did, they spliced the videos and they just selected the videos that will support their narrative.
What type of narrative are you saying?
Yung sabi nila walang attack.
But the DILG was quick to contradict Aplasca.
No, not at all. We may timestamp naman lahat eh. So it couldn't have been spliced. Those were direct from CCTV cameras of the Senate, their servers.
Kapatid mobile journalist Mary Monreyes, we are One News.
And with us now to help us understand the legal implications of these developments, we have University of the Philippines College of Law Associate Dean and Assistant Professor Paulo Tomase. Good morning, attorney, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Pauline, and to your viewers.
All right, well, attorney, the Supreme Court has denied Senator Bato de la Rosa's request for a TRO. And the question is, does this now clear the way for authorities to enforce the ICC warrant on Senator de la Rosa?
In theory, it does, right? A temporary restraining order or a status quo ante order is precisely sought by a party who wishes to stop another party from performing an act that might frustrate the case. And just based on the denial of a TRO, a court would normally deny that if it doesn't find any risk that its judgment would be frustrated. So the denial of the TRO is material. I think what is unusual from yesterday's press release is that first, normally, even though the court has adopted this practice of releasing a press release for its decisions, it doesn't provide for an exact date of when the full decision will come out. We expect the resolution rather on the denial of the TRO to come out on Monday, on May 25. But a second equally important development is that the press release does not include the basic core reason for why it was denied, which is different from the usual press releases of the Supreme Court. So we're waiting for Monday to see whether the denial is really a blanket denial or if the court is going to give some clarificatory language or caveats.
Exactly. So the SC clarified that it only ruled on the request for immediate relief, but they have yet to decide on the main issues such as the jurisdiction of the ICC. Attorney, how important was that distinction from the Supreme Court?
It is important, but it is not unusual. That portion which says that the court will reserve the main issue for the main case is normally written into any TRO denial or even TRO grant. So it's not because the nature of a TRO is just provisional, it's a temporary remedy. Then the main remedy being sought by Senator De La Rosa, which among others includes some declaration on the jurisdiction of the ICC, that will have to await the final resolution of the main case. But as to his request for the court to issue an explicit prohibition for the meantime from the executive department for implementing its warrant or the ICC warrant, the denial is also material.
And for you, attorney, how significant was the Supreme Court's vote here on the TRO denial? It was 9 to 5 to 1.
It's hard to speculate on Supreme Court votes. It's even harder to do that when we don't have the reasoning yet. So we are awaiting the May 25 release of the Supreme Court's resolution. The 9-5-1 vote, as it is, indicates that it is not as close a vote as some others have predicted. But it is also not a overwhelming win, at least for on the side of the government. You just need 2 votes to change there for the decision to ultimately reflect the opposite, or for the TRO to be reversed, or the denial to be reversed, rather.
But attorney, is it legally possible for a petitioner to lose a TRO but ultimately still win the main case of the merits? How common is that situation in Philippine jurisprudence?
It is possible. We don't have empirical data on it, on how frequently the court does it, because many of its denials are not really published, or its grants of TRO are not published. But the TRO itself, or the denial or the grant of a TRO, isn't really indicative normally of the main case. What the TRO, as a matter of law, only requires is that the party asking for it be able to prove, among others, some clear legal right. And while that clear legal right might not yet be present at this stage of the proceeding, it is still possible, in theory, for Senator De La Rosa to prove that legal right, or the clarity of that legal right, much later in the main case. So it's not indicative, even preliminary, of the Supreme Court's ultimate decision in the main case.
All right, but attorney, what should be understood about the legal status of Senator Bato de la Rosa at this moment? Can he be considered a fugitive from justice?
I think if we're talking about fugitives from justice as a general term that day-to-day we people understand, I think there's much support for that. There is an ICC warrant against him. That warrant is considered valid by a consensus of academic opinion that warrant is also much available to the rest of the world. And so the fact that he hasn't really surrendered or hasn't been surrendered to the ICC and it is nowhere to be found may support that finding that he is a fugitive from justice. But insofar as the legal effect of that is concerned, the fugitive from justice also sets this fugitive disentitlement doctrine in the Supreme Court, where a fugitive is not allowed to seek remedy before a court. I'm actually curious whether the court touched upon that argument in the denial of the TRO. But as to just looking at the arguments for now, there's really a case for either side to say that he is legally a fugitive and legally not a fugitive. But in our ordinary everyday understanding, there is some support for saying that he's not presenting himself to the proper process in the ICC, and he can therefore be considered, at least in our ordinary sense of that word.
Can the Supreme Court attorney compel Senator De La Rosa to disclose his whereabouts?
I would find that to be unusual unless it ruled on the fugitive disentitlement doctrine. And it's not because the court doesn't have the power to compel Senator De La Rosa. It's just that normally in proceedings before the Supreme Court, and especially in the character of the petition that was filed, many of the appearances and presentations before the court are done through Senator De La Rosa's lawyers and not through the party himself. So as a represented party, there is usually no expectation for the party himself to be present unless the court orders. And if the court orders that, then there might be some truth or veracity to the fugitive disentitlement doctrine, because the court would have otherwise no reason to require him to be present.
Now, because there is no TRO, if authorities move to arrest Senator De La Rosa, what should the process be, attorney? Can he immediately be turned over to the ICC, just like what was done with former President Rodrigo Duterte? Or are there still legal remedies here for the senator?
In theory, that would be the effect, right? If the TRO was really denied, then it's a permission on the part of the executive department to carry out the ICC warrant. That's why, and I apologize for the tentative language, but that's the reason why I think legal academics, watchers are waiting for the May 25 resolution. Is there some language on the part of the court that would try to say that, we are denying the TRO, but maybe the executive department should exercise some prudence? In that case, it would also affect the way that the executive department would implement the ICC warrant. But in theory, if it's just a straight up blanket denial, then there is nothing that stops the executive department from carrying out the warrant.
All right, so now let's go to the defense of Senator Bato de la Rosa. Well, his camp insists that a foreign or international arrest warrant cannot be enforced without a local court warrant. Attorney, how legally sound is that argument?
I think the academic consensus on that is that that is not the case, both from a perspective of international law as well as domestic law. On the international law perspective, no one has credibly questioned the validity of that ICC warrant, and no one has also denied that the Philippines, despite pulling out of the Rome Statute, still has residual obligations in relation to investigations that have already commenced before it left the Rome Statute or the ICC treaty. So international law experts in the Philippines and outside have weighed in on this, and the Philippines seems bound by it. That also means that the ICC warrant could be carried out. On the domestic front, the Solicitor General made a very good observation in its comment that was submitted to the Supreme Court over the last weekend, where it said that the validity of the ICC warrant means that the Philippines should carry out the arrest, or can carry out rather, the arrest of Senator De La Rosa because of RA 9851, right? This law which was passed by the Philippines or enacted by the Philippines even before we acceded to the Rome Statute, which says that the Philippines would comply with the surrender of an individual. And it doesn't suggest in RA 9851 that we still needed to go to a court at this point. So both on international and domestic reasons, there seems to be basis for the arrest of Senator De La Rosa, even without a judicial proceeding in a Philippine court.
But speaking of RA 9851, attorney, the camp of Senator De La Rosa insists that it cannot be invoked because it has no clear enforcement mechanism for ICC cooperation. Now, does the absence of an IRR automatically render a law inoperative, or can it still be self-executing?
Absolutely not, right? I mean, that's the basic misunderstanding, I think, even, working in government. Laws do not require an IRR to be implemented. Laws become law upon their passage by Congress, their enactment by Congress, by the signature or the implied approval of the president, and after it is published, given in the period given by the law. When all of those things come together and the law becomes effective, then the law can be carried out to the best judgment of the executive department, even without an IRR, unless the law makes it a condition, an explicit condition, that it will only be implemented upon the issuance of an IRR. And to my recollection, RA 9851 doesn't provide that. So the law itself is already the basis for the executive's action or carrying it out. There might be some vagueness because the law will require further details from an IRR, but it doesn't mean that the executive can't use its best judgment, at least without an IRR restricting it yet, to implement the law already and to carry it out into effect.
Well, Senator De La Rosa's lawyer, Attorney Jimmy Bondoc, also insisted that the warrant should be served through personal service. He even said that lawyers can receive arrest warrants on behalf of their clients. But is that legally allowed, Attorney?
I think it's not allowed, whether we're looking at international law or domestic law. So let's just focus on the domestic law front. Warrants are addressed in the domestic law. In Philippine warrants, for example, are not even addressed to the party to be arrested. They are actually addressed to the arresting officer, which gives that arresting officer the authority to restrain the person to be arrested and to bring that person to court. So there is no reason to serve that warrant on the individual or much less his lawyer. In fact, the reason why it's not served in advance to the party or the lawyer is because if the lawyer or the party knows that the person is about to be arrested and that there is a warrant for his or her arrest, then it gives so much incentive for that person to escape. So it's really addressed to the officer of the law. There is no requirement in Philippine law to serve that warrant upon either the the person to be arrested or the lawyer. It's just that the arresting officer will show that warrant to the person to be arrested at the moment that he's being arrested.
All right, now hypothetically speaking, attorney, let's say the Supreme Court on Monday does not rule in favor of the petitioner for Senator Bato de la Rosa. Can they still appeal that decision? And if they do appeal it, would the executive, would the government have to wait on that before enforcing the arrest warrant?
So this is already the highest court, right? And normally what would be done by the party who lost a TRO application, so who got a denial of a TRO application, would be to file a motion for reconsideration with the same court. So in this case, also with the Supreme Court. When that is done, the filing of a motion for reconsideration would also not stop the court's earlier resolution denying the TRO. So things would stand as they do today. There would be no prohibition yet on the executive department from carrying this out. And it's therefore possible, even if Senator De La Rosa files a motion for reconsideration, that the executive department may well as carry out the warrant against Senator De La Rosa.
All right, but what if Senator De La Rosa tries to seek refuge and protective custody again from the Senate? Can that legally prevent law enforcement agencies from implementing an ICC arrest warrant?
I would say legally it can, right? So there are two important considerations here. One is the legal aspect, and the second is really the political or the historical aspect. On the legal front, there is nothing that would stop the arrest, in my view, despite if you look at the provision on the privileges from arrest of a sitting senator, that privilege only applies to a narrow set of offenses. Those are minor offenses whose penalty falls below 6 years. So we can debate about what the imposable penalty is for an ICC charge of crimes against humanity. But the fact is the intent was never to give or to clothe senators with impunity. The idea was for senators not to be harassed by minor offenses so that they can do their job. But if they really are charged for a serious offense, you can look at the example of Senator De Lima, Senator Trillanes. The legal route is for them to accept arrest and the limitation on their freedom of movement and to defend themselves in court. That's also what's expected of Senator De La Rosa. Now, on the political front, that would, bring us back to what happened last Monday. But this time, the court, or the Senate rather, would have to contend with the reality that I think on the whole, the people were not satisfied with the way that they seem to have coddled Senator De La Rosa last week, to the prejudice of both the safety of Senate staff, but also the prestige and reputation of the institution. So it might not be wise, despite the legal uncertainties, it might not be wise on the part of the Senate to really exhaust its political capital and its legitimacy just on defending a single person who is under an international warrant.
Now, to those who will be aiding Senator Bato de la Rosa, while there is a standing arrest warrant, can they be charged with obstruction of justice and harboring a fugitive, or is that premature for now?
I think it's a bit premature in the sense that, we have to account for the reality that while in my view, the helping him escape would be objectionable and certainly disappointing, especially from our elected public officers. That conduct doesn't necessarily make it illegal. And the crime of obstruction of justice in the Philippines has certain elements and has a certain context. And the context, just from my reading, seems to contemplate a domestic legal proceeding and probably a domestic warrant. So it doesn't make what the persons who aided Senator De La Rosa any better. It doesn't excuse them for what they did, and I think they ought to be held accountable at some point, but maybe not through a criminal statute or not through a criminal prosecution. It's just those limitations of our criminal laws where, we tend to read criminal laws very strictly because that's what due process also in the Philippines requires.
And finally, Attorney, what will you be watching closely in the coming days, and what should the public watch out for?
I think you're looking at two important developments, right? Which, whether we admit it or not, are linked. So, on the arrest of Senator Bato, it's important to look at the decision or the resolution of the Supreme Court on Monday. There are a few things that people should be curious about. The first is whether the court actually responded to the fugitive disentitlement arguments of both the Solicitor General and the response by Senator De La Rosa. And the second is why the court didn't find either a clear legal right or urgency to grant the PRO application despite the impending arrest or threat of arrest of Senator De La Rosa. On the impeachment front, we're waiting for the responses of the Vice President and the reply of the House of Representatives. And on the answer of the Vice President, unlike in the House, where she simply dismissed the charges against her, this is already basically the last stage for her to argue her case to the public. And so we're expecting a more substantive reply to the articles of impeachment against her, the real defense, if I can put it that way.
All right. Well, things will get quite interesting on the political front in the coming days. But for now, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. That was Attorney Paolo Tamase. Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you.
Now, do stay tuned. Morning Matters will be back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. Well, as we know, two House lawmakers have filed a resolution seeking a congressional inquiry into the back-to-back tripping of NGCP transmission lines that triggered red and yellow alerts in Luzon and Visayas. Now, lawmakers said the incident exposed serious weaknesses in the country's power grid and raised concerns over possible lapses in maintenance, monitoring, and compliance. They also questioned whether the failure was due to negligence on the part of the NGCP. The proposed inquiry will also look into alleged delays in reporting the incident to regulators and possible violations of grid rules. And joining us now is Energy Undersecretary Mario Marasigan. Good morning, Yusek, and welcome to Morning Matters.
Good morning, Ms. Pauline, especially to your viewers and followers.
All right, first of all, Yusek, what is the current situation regarding rotating brownouts, especially in affected areas, including Luzon and Visayas?
Yeah, for today, we don't see any yellow or red alert for Luzon. We have sufficient supply. In fact, we have more than 18,000 megawatts of available supply, and our projection is way below. It's at around 12,785 megawatts. However, we have some concerns in the Visayas, wherein our projected peak demand will reach 2,575 megawatts, and our alert capacity is only limited to 2,969, wherein our reserves in the morning at 354 megawatts will go down to as low as 151 megawatts. That means we will have yellow alert. We still have supply, but our reserve may not be enough to support the entire grid.
But sir, what is still causing the ongoing rotational brownouts, despite all these efforts to stabilize the grid?
Please allow me to clarify that under the yellow alert, we don't have any rotational brownout. That means we have sufficient supply for energy requirements or the demand of our general public. However, if red alert ensues, then that's the time that we may impose. It's still a possibility that there could be rotational brownout, but not necessarily. So for Visayas, we don't expect any rotational brownout. We are just monitoring the system to ensure that the reserve will still be sufficient to provide ample supply for the area. So we don't see any rotational brownout for today.
Okay. But sir, how long can we expect these conditions to persist?
Well, for Luzon, we don't see any possibilities to have yellow or red alerts, at least in the coming weeks. We are monitoring and we have our power outlook simulations until the end of the year. And we don't see any possibilities of having a yellow alert. But for Visayas, we may have continuous yellow alert until at least one of the three major coal facilities in Visayas will come into active service. For example, we have two facilities in Cebu with a maximum capacity of 169 megawatts or a rated capacity of 150 for a total of 300 megawatts that remains to be unavailable at this time. While in Panay, we have a 150 megawatt facility that is still under repair. So we hope that at least one of those three facilities will come online within June so that we can avoid any alert level in Visayas.
All right, so based on your projections, sir, you don't see the power situation in the coming months worsening or getting more severe despite the looming effects of El Nino?
Well, we have prepared and we are continuously monitoring the situation of all our grids. That means Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao to ensure that there will be available capacities. We have written and sought the explanation as well as the timelines of these generation facilities that are still on outage, as well as the conditions of our transmission system that is being operated by our system operator, which is the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. So our close monitoring, we hope that we will not see any alerts in the near future.
And to elaborate more on that, sir, what specific instructions did the DOE give to the NGCP, especially because President Bongbong Marcos has already given a directive to stabilize grid conditions?
Well, we have requested the National Grid Corporations to give us the details on the reasons, the cause of the failures of the two major transmission lines that went on outage last May 13. Then they have to provide us also information why did this happen and the timelines that needed to be the timelines for the immediate repair. While it is already repaired, we want to see the timelines regarding their maintenance program because these are big facilities, 500 megawatts, and these are the part of our backbone grid system. Particularly also that these two transmission lines are actually providing the services for 5 facilities, 2 companies operating using natural gas.
Pero sir, are there enough accountability measures in place to ensure that the NGCP and other stakeholders will address this problem?
Definitely there are. We have the Philippine Grid Code as well as the concession agreement of our system operators to ensure their compliance with all the rules and regulations therein. And our regulator is the Energy Regulatory Commission. Should we find any non-compliance in our investigation, then we will endorse it to the Energy Regulatory Commission to ensure that there will be appropriate further investigation, and should this merit accountabilities and penalties, then ERC should do so.
And looking ahead, Yusek, are there enough new power projects in the pipeline so that we can address the expected rise in demand in the coming years?
Yes, definitely there is. And we are closely monitoring based on last year State of the Nation address of the Philippines, of the President. Then we are monitoring actually 200, a minimum of 200 power projects that should come online until 2028. And actually for June, we have identified which was supposed to be online by April. We have 25 power generation facilities that are undergoing testing and commissioning at this time. And this will provide us an additional capacity of 1,400 megawatts. Up to 2028, we are monitoring more than 200 projects with a total aggregate capacity of more than 12,000 megawatts.
Pero sir, are they on track to meet this 2028 deadline of going online and contributing to the grid?
There are concerns that were relayed to us, but we are addressing it. And the majority of them are actually coming online in accordance with their timelines. Although some of them have problems, but the department, together with other government agencies, are coordinating so that we can ensure that we can facilitate any guidance and assistance to be accorded to them on time.
And finally, sir, are there any specific conservation measures, practices that the DOE is asking the public to adopt during this time?
Well, actually, we have several programs on energy conservation, energy efficiency and conservation. We are advocating actually a 1-hour putting off the lights every Saturday between 8 to 9 p.m. That's one. And second, just follow and make it a habit to conserve energy. Let's be wise in our electricity utilization.
And even the unplugging of appliances, diba, Yusek,
That's the
makatulong po yan.
Yes, that's the simplest way of energy conservation.
All right, we're going to leave that there for now. Thank you very much for your time. That was Energy Undersecretary Mario Marasigan. Thank you, Yusek.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pauline, and thank you very much to all.
And now on to other news. Health officials are racing to contain a fast-spreading Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. The World Health Organization said that there are already over 500 suspected cases and 130 deaths. The WHO has declared the Ebola outbreak as a global health emergency and warned about its alarming scale and speed of spread. The outbreak is caused by the rare Bundibugyo strain. There is no current vaccine or treatment available.
We are also at the international level looking at what candidate vaccines or treatment are available and if any could be of use in this outbreak. Bevo is one of the potential vaccine that is looked for eventually be able to come and bring additional prevention and protection among the communities here. Yes, it is. But what I know is actually it would take what I know from WHO, it would take 2 months for it to be available.
The Department of Health is set to release updated protocols amid the spread of the Ebola virus in Africa. According to the DOH, the protocols will focus on tightening surveillance on aircraft and vessels arriving from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. Now, don't go away. We still have more matters to discuss after this break. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. Lawmakers have approved on second reading a bill seeking to regulate political dynasties. The House of Representatives passed House Bill 8389, or the proposed Anti-Political Dynasty Act, through viva voce, or a voice vote. Under the bill, politicians with relatives up to the second degree, including spouses, parents, children, grandparents, grandchildren, and siblings, may be covered by restrictions. Critics argue that the bill may still allow dynasties to continue, with some civil society groups pushing a people's initiative, or what they call a genuine anti-dynasty law. Some relatives of the missing Sabongeros have filed complaints before the National Police Commission, expressing concern over the decreasing number of complainants attending hearings. 2 policemen are facing administrative charges for allegedly facilitating a secret meeting between police officers implicated in the case and the victims' relatives. The accused include Highway Patrol Group spokesman Police Lieutenant Nadame Malang and Major Rinaldo Panebe Jr. of the Philippine National Police Custodial Center, who were alleged to have arranged an amicable settlement between the parties.
Kapalit po yon ng hindi pag-attend para humina daw po ang kaso. At kapag mahina na daw po ang kaso, lalabas na si AA at pasasalamatan sila, doon daw po magbibigay ng malaking halaga.
Sino si AA?
Si Atong Ang po. Yung foundation po ang ginagamit nila para magbigay daw po ng tulong.
I have yet to see the charges filed, pero it is safe to assume this would be grave misconduct and conduct unbecoming of a police officer, if ever. Iimbestigahan ito ng ating IMIS. Yung ating IMIS ay nasa kaliwa natin ngayon. So, ngayon na natanggap na natin ang complaint ng mga relatives ng mga missing Sabongero, I am sure that our inspection, monitoring, and investigation service will be on top of it, and they will investigate properly.
And now on to the weather. Easterlies continue to trigger rains over some parts of the country. Affected areas include Metro Manila, the rest of Luzon, and Visayas. Isolated rain showers or thunderstorms are expected. Meanwhile, several areas recorded dangerous heat index levels on Wednesday. The highest was felt in Baler, Aurora at 46 degrees Celsius. 45-degree heat index was also recorded in Dagupan City, Sangley Point, Virac in Catanduanes, Rojas City, and Maasin in southern Leyte. And now in sports, Eliza Valdez said she remains open to a possible return to Alas Pilipinas as the national team prepares for the 2026 AVC Women's Cup. Valdez reiterated that she is always willing to represent the country in any capacity. She also expressed excitement over the potential inclusion of younger players in the national pool, noting that several collegiate standouts are expected to be called up amid a possible team revamp. The 2026 AVC Women's Cup will be held from June 6 to 14 in Candon, with Alas Pilipinas aiming to improve on its previous finishes of second place in 2024 and third place in 2023. All right, and that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we've given you just the right start to your morning. Let's make the day matter. I'm Pauline Verzosa. Kapatid, we are One News. All sides, all the time.